Thanks to the Congress member. I'm really excited about this next panel. I do believe highly in the power of procurement. It's often thought of as not a sexy issue when we talk about food and agriculture, but I find it fascinating. So I'm excited to sit down with all of you and dive into this. And Bill, I'm hoping that you can start by talking about how procurement practices can support the infrastructure of a resilient food and agriculture system. Why is procurement so important?
Well, I think Fidel really toned us up really well on this topic when he talked about our broken food system. And some would argue that our food system's not broken, it's operating the way it was intended to. But I think we would all agree that that's probably not in our best interest long term. So where the common market is existing right now is in this space of using procurement as a model for food systems change. And so what we endeavor to do is lift up small to medium-sized growers and give them opportunities to sell into wholesale markets. Many of the farmers that we work with are between 10 and 500 acres. And what we learned in the pandemic was that there were farms that were outside of the Southeast that couldn't get product to us, and we had empty shelves. So we were fortunate to have a contract with the USDA for the Farmers to Food Bank program, and we were able to deliver 15,000 boxes a week. We fed 15,000 families during the pandemic, and much of that product came from farms that typically don't get those kinds of opportunities, farms that would go away. We had Secretary Vilsack at our warehouse recently, and he told us that 2022 was one of the best years of agriculture in the history of agriculture. And the problem is that 92.5% of the farms that benefited are the larger farms. Yeah. So there were 11% of the farms in this country split 7.5% of that revenue. We know that's not a sustainable model. We know farms can't exist that way. And so one of the things that we endeavor to do is provide opportunities for farmers to be able to sell into these markets. We know that farmers not only need markets, they need direct investment. So when we're building infrastructure, we know that they need capital. We have a fund that we directly invest in the farms. We've provided over $750,000 in the past year and a half to farms so they can build irrigation, cold storage, equipment, things that they need in order to be viable.
Yes, please. That infrastructure is so valuable for a lot of reasons, and one is for farmers, for a reason, are risk adverse because they don't want to invest in those things if they don't know that there's a market for them. Do you feel like you've created this cycle where they feel confident enough to continue working with you?
Many of the farmers that we work with have had market opportunities in the past. They've sold to Walmarts, they've sold to the Publixes of the world, they've sold to school systems, and what ended up happening was these farms will never be the lowest bidder. So these opportunities came and then they went. And when that happens, you lose a great deal of trust. So farmers have said, well, I realize there are new opportunities, but I've been there before, I've seen that, I'm not interested. So one of the things that we're excited about is that we're now one of the 2 distributors for the LFPA program, and that is the Local Food Procurement Assistance Cooperative Agreement, also a USDA program. And so that we have $8 million to provide food to the 8 Georgia food banks. Kyle's is one of our biggest customers, and we source from, quote, socially disadvantaged growers. That's Black, brown growers, women-owned farms, veteran-owned farms. Those are the farms that we're sourcing from, and so we're using this as an on-ramp started in 2023 up to 2025 to help these farmers, along with the investments that we're making, help them get ready for wholesale opportunities while we build wholesale opportunities with the customers that we have. Emory, Spelman, Bon Appetit, huge customers of ours. And so as we work through incremental improvements in purchasing with them, these farmers are getting ready. And so there need to be markets for them when that time comes.
That's exciting. And you mentioned Kyle, so I want to turn to him next. I'm wondering what emergency food organizations like the Atlanta Community Food Bank are thinking when it comes to sourcing healthy food for your neighbors. Because I think often what food banks have been criticized is, there's a lot of processed food, there's not the healthy, fresh, and other delicious food available.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. our food bank, we're one of the larger food banks in the country. We're now within the Feeding America network, the 5th largest food bank in the country. And we're serving a tremendous number of people. The need for food assistance across the country right now has risen dramatically as a result of the impact of inflation over the last 2 years. We're serving 40% more people today than we did just 2 years ago. About 230,000 households every month,
Wow.
more than 11% of the population, are accessing food from food pantries across our region.
Yeah.
11% of the population. And so as we think about that level of demand, we've really had to build a sourcing machine to respond to that level of demand, and have quadrupled the volume of food we distribute out into the community over the last decade. This year we'll distribute about 125 million pounds of food. As we've grown, we've also recognized the disproportionate impact in the communities that we serve of diet-related disease like heart disease and diabetes, et cetera. And we've worked really hard to drive the growth of our sourcing with more healthy options
Sure.
for the folks that we're serving. So today, the food bank, more than 60% of the product that we distribute is either fresh or frozen. This year, our largest product category will be fresh produce, and we'll distribute about 35 million pounds of fresh produce this year, which is more than a quarter of our total volume. And alongside that, we distribute a lot of animal protein,
Right.
dairy products, et cetera. And so combining just food access with healthy access is a huge part of the way we think about our future. It's a huge part of what our neighbors need and deserve.
Sure.
And we have to think comprehensively about where we get that product from. We've got to partner with big industrial companies like grocery stores and large growers. And from an equity lens, we've got to work with smaller growers to ensure that we've got a robust mix of product that's available for our
Absolutely.
neighbors.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up frozen foods, which maybe we can talk about later, because I think they're so important to this equation. But Brad and Kevin, if I can turn to you, both big representatives of the private sector, but you have so much power to leverage purchasing power. And really commit to sustainability, commit to farmers, and a diverse group of farmers. I wonder how you both sort of look at that, and I don't know which one of you wants to go first.
Well, thank you for having me. H&H Hospitality is a food and beverage operator at the airport. And so we operate a number of businesses, from restaurants to full-service restaurants, fast casual, to bars. And while different concepts of food don't always allow the flexibility to choose where you source from, when we can, we should. And it's something that, I'll go back from this conference more motivated to make sure that we are looking at all of our local options to make a difference in procurement. The one time that I think that the largest example, I think, in Atlanta at the airport that we've made a significant impact in local sourcing is H&F Bread Company. Has anyone ever heard of H&F Burger in Pond City Market? Well, their first restaurant was on Peachtree over a decade ago, and the burger was just a feature. It was a 10 o'clock thing. They started saying, we'll do 10 burgers a night, 20 burgers a night. And they want to make them really special burgers. And they ended up making the bread in-house because they couldn't source a great bread. And the bread was so good that other restaurants started to ask them, hey, can we buy some of your bread? And it took off around the city from restaurant to restaurant to restaurant, and it eventually got in the airport. So there's one restaurant that was doing 20 buns a night, was now serving tens of thousands of all types of bread going to the airport. And what we learned from that instance was that many times people will say local is more expensive and it comes at the cost of profits. But we ended up finding a better product at a better cost and supporting a local business in doing so. And that was just one good example of how local was actually a really good business.
It's a great example. Brad?
So I think along the same lines, we are a large hotel company. Obviously, we've got thousands of hotels around the world, and And I look at procurement as really the connection with the community. Every hotel is a part of the community. Every hotel has family members that are coming in to visit locals that live there, and employees that are from that area, and the products and produce and whatnot that is produced in that area is often and usually featured in our restaurants. Our structure is not a series of corporately controlled restaurants as much as it's kind of corporately controlled strategies of what each one of these multi-brands that we have. We've got 30 brands across all different businesses, not just hospitality and lodging. But I think of procurement as the way in which we can actually remain connected and also establish a connection to the community by which people are visiting, so they have that sense of place. And I think that's one of the most important things in food and beverage, particularly in travel. And today's traveler is not looking to bring back the tchotchke to put on the wall and say, I was there. They actually are bringing back images on their iPhones of experiences they had and talking about the things that they saw and generally the things that they ate.
Right.
So as we look at all of these amazing topics today, and I thank you for this. This is not my first food tank, and I'm just always inspired by any time that you put these together. But to me, procurement and how we actually purchase and bring things into the hotel is the way in which we connect with the community.
Yeah, and it can really change things dramatically. Kashi, I'm wondering how organizations can make it easier for the Marriotts of the world to source food that is better for both people and the planet.
Yeah, so at Retaaza, Bill mentioned procurement, Kyle mentioned food access. We're talking about all aspects, both sides of the supply chain. So we are sourcing food from local farmers. We are helping farmers gain access to new markets and new customers. We're a for-profit model, I should mention. We're a B Corp. And we're investing in all the stakeholders. So because we're making money, because we are creating access for farmers to these new opportunities, these new markets, we're able to reinvest those profits back into our communities, creating a more circular economy. We really believe sustainability in all aspects of that word, not just how it's good for the planet, but how is it good for the community? How is it good for our neighbors? So we are buying this food. We are supporting our local farms with normal, regular purchase orders. We are creating these pipelines so that when there is food waste, and we've talked about food waste today a little bit, Fidel mentioned food waste, it's a big piece of the conversation. Georgia is an agriculture state. It's our biggest industry, $83.6 billion worth of an industry. And 40 to 50% of what farmers grow is not used. That could add, just in terms of tax revenue to the state, think about what that adds. I mean, we could easily have a $100 billion plus economy. And that could go into investing into communities, farmers, food access, programs that would help everybody up here, everybody in the room. But we're not talking enough, I don't think, about food waste. And it's a sustainability issue. It's a biggest piece of our landfills.
It's a justice issue.
It's a justice issue. So we at Retaaza are thinking about all of these components and how we can have a greater impact with our time spent than just a one-for-one impact. So when we buy from a farmer, when we create that dollar that we pay a farmer for that food waste, we are helping a local economy. We're not only selling that piece of food to someone like Emory, the strawberries and the spinach here today are food waste, food rescue. Thank you, Emory, and bon appetit. But we are also able to donate that food to nonprofits who work with our hungry. Many of our partners are in the room today, including Kyle. We're able to create neighborhood markets with many of the partners that we have, including Wholesome Wave Georgia, who's in the room today. So we also couldn't do this without partnership, but sustainability has to be part of the conversation. Food access has to be part of that same conversation. Being equitable with all farmers needing help, I mean, they all need help. I mean, all of this has to be part of the discussion as we think about how to create stronger local food systems.
Yeah, I mean, putting farmers first it sounds obvious, but it's something that a lot of large companies have not done in the past. And I wonder how all of you sort of look at that. You know, Kashi mentioned collaboration and partnership, but you also have to, you know, go back to what I discussed a little bit with Fidel about trust and confidence and those sorts of things. That's relationship building that takes sometimes years. I think during the pandemic it was sped up, but how do you build those relationships?
Well, I think from the airport perspective, I mean, we're obviously, I'm in private business, but the airport is slower to react because we're in an airport and there's a lot of rules and restrictions around changing concepts. But I will say that as the public awareness has gone up, the brands that have put food sustainability, fresh and local into their purpose have done better business. And so if you look at brands like Sweet Green or Kava or Lemonade, you know, these brands in the last 10 years didn't exist. But in the next 10 years, you'll see them popping up in airports all around the country because this is what people want. And so I think, you know, from an airport perspective, in Atlanta specifically, you'll see over 100 new restaurants in the next 3 years, 2 to 3 years, and you'll start to see these fresher, more local, sustainable concepts that have relationships with local farms. You'll see them pop up, and they're going to be here for a while. And so I think that's just you know, in the airport, we're more of a reactive facility. You know, we're not leading like on the street side locations, but it's coming soon.
That's great. Kyle and anyone else on this panel, you know, when we're talking about foods and neighbors and making sure that Marriotts and other hospitality centers have a sense of place, we also need to be thinking about culturally relevant foods and making sure that those get into the system. How do we build those relationships? Kyle?
Sure. So I know for us at the food bank, the makeup of the community that we serve continues to evolve dramatically as the region's population continues to evolve dramatically. And so it's really important for us, as we think about sourcing and procurement, that we are getting an assortment of food that is going to be relevant to the people that we serve, that's going to be useful. The fundamental issue that the people we serve face is ultimately an economic problem. You know, they can't afford all of the things that they need in life. And so the food that we provide, if it's relevant, has a huge budget relieving economic impact for them. But if that food is not something they can use or is meaningful given their culture, then we've just wasted a whole bunch of people's time.
And maybe wasted the food.
Well, we just moved waste from one place to another,
Yeah.
right? We've moved it from our dumpster to the neighbors' trash cans that we've shipped it out to. So we've been working really hard to understand from our neighbors what we really mean by culturally relevant foods.
Sure.
What are the items that are most important on an ongoing basis that we can, because we can't source everything, but we can prioritize the things that make the biggest difference and then build relationships with providers that will have those items available, either donated or at a very discounted rate in a way that is going to be meaningful. We've had to diversify our supplier mix and continue to build relationships also with producers that represent different kinds of communities and that are producing different kinds of things.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Phil.
And if I could jump on what Kyle was just mentioning, and it also speaks to the previous question about partnerships. I think the thing that's absolutely essential when we're talking about this kind of food system reinforcement is something that's come up multiple times today, and that is the importance of story. And if you doubt that story matters, ask if you knew who Caitlin Clark was before last year. But now we recognize that just by telling these stories, it gets to the heart of the matter and it gets to a different level. When I meet with potential new customers and their first question is, how much is your squash? You're not going to be a partner of ours. I'm going to waste your time and mine if we continue this conversation. You know, if you ask, how much do I have to buy in order for you to deliver to me? Probably not a good partner for us because we are about the story. We are about the farmer. So we don't talk about the squash. We talk about Starlet Roots, Black woman-owned organic farm, how she grows, why she grows, where she grows. the impact on the environment based on how she grows. And if that's interesting to you, if you want to partner with the common market to partner with Starlit Roots, then we can have a conversation about squash. But that we have to get that story out of the way first, because that's what truly matters. So when we talk about partnership, we're talking about, okay, how can we do something, kind of going to my earlier response, for a period of years? Not what's on the availability list now, even though that's important, but how can we continue to support this and other farms for the next 3 to 5 years so that they will continue to invest in their model, they will believe that wholesale selling is a reality, and that the way they grow does have value in the marketplace.
Sure, absolutely.
That sustainable growing does have value. It has value to our children, to our children's children, to our planet, to our economy. All of these things are important, but it begins with the story, and it begins with finding like-minded partners who believe in that story.
Yeah, absolutely. Kashi and Brad, I imagine storytelling is a huge part of the work. I don't know, you want to go first, Brad?
Yeah, sure, because actually I was going to say story, and I'm glad you brought that up, because honestly, what people are buying, as I talked about, is experiences and actually memories, and story is important. It is no longer just okay to sell commodities on plates and just to play the price game. Now, price has a component, for sure.
Sure.
And there is a cost, there is a price to pay for the right story. So there is a premium there. But that story has to be built in properly and built into the built into the menu as such. But it's also part of the entire sales approach, because we do restaurant sales where individuals come in and order off the menu, and we do sales like meetings like this, where this was planned months ago and a menu was planned, price was determined, and an offering was made. And I think as we talk about in that type of scenario, which there's so much volume, the story is really important to be able to tell to all of the attendees, not just the meeting planners, what it is that you're experiencing in the back of the room there. And as I think about catering, about 60% of our volume in the U.S. and Canada is catering. Internationally, it's more like 50-50. But I think there's such a great opportunity there. And talking about food waste as well, it's great to talk about food waste, and we've been on a number of panels talking about food waste. But understand that as we measure our own food waste, kitchens are big producers of food. There's going to be waste. We can't get to a net zero. I mean, if I would describe nirvana of food waste, it's the last person in the room takes the last morsels on their plate, and we have a zero waste. But the majority of what we find is post-consumer, which as we translate that, means that it's been prepared for the consumer and has either been out there and oversubscribed, as I would say, on a plate, or overproduced for fear of running out. That's where we as an industry are really now leaning in with our sales techniques to say, okay, meeting planner, great, you got 100 people, we're going to charge you X number of dollars. It's always going to be more than you want. But we are really going to try and not prepare for 120% of your group in case 20% just show up out of thin air. We're going to try and prepare for your group. Right. And so it really is about production quantity, because for us, we don't have a lot of surplus, and we donate any surplus we can to food banks, but my goal is not to have any surplus that is donatable.
Kashi, a final word on this storytelling and why it's important and how you get your messaging out there.
Sure. So storytelling, agreed with everybody, is a huge component of this because it's about the people and about the humans that are connected to our food system, is why we're up here, is why it's so important. And humans are at the root of every story that we really care about, right? So just a quick story to round us out. We had a farmer come to us, a big farmer, and he called me. We were 6 months into our company. He called me and said, I've got some tomatoes I'm about to throw out. And I was like, how many tomatoes? He was like, a whole truckload. And I was like, how big is the truck? 53 foot, okay, the big semis. I was like, I have no idea how many tomatoes that is. He was like, it's 35,000 pounds of tomatoes. Who goes and buys a pound, right? Okay. So I had to figure out what to do with that because our model was working. Our circular economy works. from the revenue that we generated from our customers, we were able to purchase the entire truck. And we upped the price of the order for the farmer because he wasn't asking for enough. So we asked him to charge us $2 more per box. We paid for the entire truck on the spot. Donated that entire truck because of amazing clients who pay us for the food that we deliver every day. We donated that entire truck to a food bank. And we fed so many people amazing, nutritious food. And that is what we should be doing. We should be able to find a way to do more with the time we're spending on these issues. And it's because of partners and conversations like this that it is happening. It's because you are hosting talks like this. It's because of the people in the room. We need incentives. We need more incentives to encourage people outside of this room to buy local. People here already get that. That's why we're here. But how do we get the people not in this room, how do we incentivize them to buy more locally? Is it tax incentives to buy more local food? What is it? What is it going to take for people to spend more and divert those truckloads of tomatoes that are getting thrown out every day?
Great story, great question to end on as well. Thank you, Kashi. Thank you to all of the panelists. Please give them a round of applause. Great work. Thank you, everyone.